My name is Ethan, and I've worked as a park ranger in northern Arizona for the past 6 years. Most people imagine Arizona as endless desert, scorching heat, saguaro cacti, red rock formations stretching toward a merciless sun. And sure, that's the southern part of the state. But up here where I work, it's a different world entirely. Coconino National Forest sits in the high country, where the elevation pushes past 7,000 feet. Ponderosa pines tower overhead, their bark smelling faintly of vanilla in the summer heat. In winter we get snow, real snow, the kind that blankets the forest floor and muffles every sound until the world feels wrapped in cotton. It's beautiful, isolated. And at night, especially in the dead hours between midnight and dawn, it's the kind of place where you remember that humans weren't the first things to walk these woods, and we sure as hell won't be the last. I was 24 when I started, fresh out of a forestry program at Northern Arizona University. Idealistic as they come, I wanted to protect wilderness, educate hikers, maybe fight a wildfire or two if I was lucky. The ranger station offered me a position monitoring the northern perimeter, Tower 9 they called it, and I jumped at the chance. The tower itself is a small 2-story structure perched on a ridge overlooking miles of pine forest. First floor, equipment storage, a bathroom with a temperamental water heater, and a radio station linked to the main ranger hub 15 miles south. Second floor, living quarters, a cot, a desk, a propane stove, and windows on all sides for fire spotting. It's not luxury, but it's mine. My supervisor's name was Tom Redding, 52 years old, weathered face, the kind of man who could read a forest the way other people read newspapers. He'd been working this area for over 2 decades, and when he spoke, people listened. On my first day, Tom drove me up to Tower 9 in his beat-up Ford Ranger. We didn't talk much during the ride. He pointed out trail markers, showed me where the access roads connected, mentioned a few spots where hikers tended to get lost, standard orientation stuff. It wasn't until we reached the tower, until he'd helped me unload my gear and shown me how to work the radio, that he said something I didn't understand. "There's one rule we follow up here that isn't in the manual," Tom said, leaning against the doorframe. His eyes were on the tree line, not on me. "After midnight, if you hear someone calling from the woods, calling for help, calling your name, calling anyone's name, you don't answer. You don't respond. You don't go outside to check. You stay inside, lock the door, and you wait until sunrise." I laughed. I actually laughed. I thought he was hazing me. Tom didn't laugh. He turned, looked me square in the face, and repeated it slower. "I don't care if it sounds like a hiker. I don't care if it sounds like a child. I don't care if the voice says someone's bleeding out and needs immediate help. You do not answer. You understand me, Ethan?" The way he said my name, flat, final, made the smile die on my face. "Yeah," I said. "I understand." "Good." He handed me a binder. "Read through this tonight. It's got fire protocols, wildlife procedures, emergency contacts, everything you need. I'll check in on you in 3 days." Then he left. I stood there in the tower, watching his truck disappear down the dirt road, and I felt the first prickle of unease settle into my chest. That night I read through the binder, cover to cover, fire spotting grids, bear encounter protocols, how to handle lost hikers, search and rescue procedures, medical emergency guidelines, nothing, absolutely nothing, about callings from the woods. I told myself Tom was messing with me, old-timer humor, a way to rattle the rookie, but I locked the door anyway. The first week was quiet, boring even. I spent my days hiking the perimeter, clearing brush from the trails, checking the water sources. At night, I'd sit in the tower with a book, monitoring the radio. Occasionally I'd hear chatter from other rangers, routine check-ins, weather updates, the occasional lost hiker being guided back to the trailhead. The forest at night was loud in its own way. Coyotes yipped in the distance. Owls called from the pines. Once, I heard something large moving through the underbrush. Probably an elk, maybe a black bear, but nothing human, nothing that spoke. I started to relax, started to think Tom had been exaggerating. Maybe there'd been an incident years ago, some confused hiker wandering around at night, and it had turned into a ghost story the rangers told each other. Then came my 8th night. It was late October. The temperature had started dropping hard after sunset. and by midnight I could see my breath inside the tower, even with the propane heater running. I'd just finished my hourly radio check-in. Tower 9, all clear. When I heard it, a voice, faint, distant, coming from somewhere south of the tower. Hello? I froze. The voice came again, a little louder this time. Hello? Is anyone there? Male, mid-30s maybe. Calm, not panicked, just asking. I moved to the window and peered out into the darkness. The moon was a thin crescent, barely enough light to see by. The forest was a wall of black shapes and deeper shadows. I'm lost, the voice called. I think I'm near a ranger tower. Can anyone hear me? My hand moved toward the radio. Instinct. Training. Someone's lost, you help them. Then I remembered Tom's rule. After midnight, you don't answer. I pulled my hand back. The voice called again. Please. My phone's dead. I've been walking for hours. I just need directions back to the trailhead. It sounded reasonable, genuine, the kind of thing you'd hear from a hiker who'd stayed out too late and lost their bearings. I grabbed my flashlight and my binoculars. I didn't turn the flashlight on, not yet, but I scanned the tree line with the binoculars, trying to spot movement. A headlamp, a figure, nothing, just trees. The voice continued. I know someone's up there. I can see the tower. Please. That word. The way it stretched, like it was testing the shape of desperation in its mouth. I backed away from the window. The calling went on for another 10 minutes, sometimes louder, sometimes softer. Sometimes it sounded like it was moving, circling the tower maybe, but I never saw anything. No light, no shadow, no footsteps crunching through the pine needles. And then, abruptly, it stopped, just cut off mid-sentence. The silence that followed was worse than the voice. I sat on the cot, flashlight in my lap, and I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. When Tom came by 3 days later, I told him what happened. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded once. You did good. You didn't answer. What was it? I asked. Tom leaned back against the truck, arms crossed. Honestly, I don't know. No one does. But I can tell you this. It happens. Not every night, not even every week, but it happens. And it's been happening for as long as this station's been here. Has anyone ever answered? I asked. Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Yeah, twice. Both times they went outside to help. Both times they didn't come back. My stomach dropped. What do you mean they didn't come back? I mean we found their truck still parked at the tower, their gear still inside, their radios still on, but no bodies, no tracks leading away, nothing. He looked at me, and his expression was hard. So you follow the rule, Ethan. No matter what you hear, no matter how real it sounds, you stay inside and you don't answer. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. Tom clapped me on the shoulder and climbed back into his truck. As he drove away, I stood there watching the dust settle on the dirt road, and I felt the weight of the forest pressing in around me. The callings became part of the routine. Not every night. Sometimes a week would pass without hearing anything, but often enough that I started keeping a log, unofficial, just for myself. November 3rd, 1:14 a.m., female voice, late 20s maybe, asked for water, said she'd twisted her ankle. November 10th, 12:47 a.m., child's voice, young, maybe 7 or 8. Crying, said he couldn't find his mum. November 17th, 2:03 a.m., male voice, deep and rough, didn't ask for help, just said, I know you're in there. That last one rattled me more than the others, because it wasn't pretending. It wasn't trying to sound like a lost hiker. It was just stating a fact. I started noticing patterns. The callings always happened after midnight, never before. They always came from the woods, never from the road. And they never lasted longer than 15 minutes. But the voices themselves, they were always different. Different ages, different genders, different accents. It was like something out there had a catalogue of voices to choose from. In late November, I met another ranger named Carla. She worked Tower 6 about 8 miles west of my position. We crossed paths at the main station during a supply run, and when she found out I was assigned to Tower 9, she gave me a look I couldn't quite read. "You doing okay up there?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Why?" She hesitated. Then she said, "Tower 9 has a reputation. People don't usually last more than a season." "Tom didn't mention that." "Tom wouldn't." She leaned against the counter, lowering her voice. "Look, I don't know what you've heard or what you've experienced, but just follow the rules, especially the one about the callings. You've heard them too?" "Once," she said quietly. "At Tower 6. It was my second week. I heard a woman calling for help. Said her name was Sarah. Said she'd been hiking with her husband and got separated." "Did you answer?" "No, but I wanted to." She looked at me and her eyes were serious. "It's hard, Ethan. It's really hard. Because it sounds so real. But you can't. You just can't." I nodded. Carla clapped me on the shoulder, much like Tom had, and headed out. I drove back to Tower 9 that afternoon, and for the first time since I'd started, I felt a flicker of doubt. Not about the rule. I believed Tom. I believed Carla. But I wondered, what happens if I don't answer? What if one night the thing out there gets tired of being ignored? December brought snow, heavy, wet snow that clung to the pines and turned the forest into something out of a postcard. It also brought silence, the kind of deep, muffled quiet that only happens when the world is buried under a blanket of white. The callings stopped for 2 weeks. I started to think maybe it was over. Maybe whatever had been out there had moved on. Or maybe the cold had driven it away. I was wrong. On December 19th at 1:32 a.m., I heard a voice I recognized. "Ethan?" I was halfway through making coffee when I heard it. The mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. "Ethan, it's me. It's your brother. I need help." My younger brother, Tyler, had died 4 years ago. Car accident. Head-on collision with a drunk driver on Highway 89. I know his voice. I know it better than my own. And the thing calling from the woods was using it. "Ethan, please, I'm so cold. I don't know where I am. Can you help me?" My legs moved before my brain caught up. I was at the door, hand on the lock, before I realized what I was doing. "Stop." Tom's voice in my head. Carla's warning. The rule. You don't answer. "Ethan, I can see the light. Just open the door. I need you." I pressed my forehead against the door and closed my eyes. It wasn't him. It couldn't be him. He was gone. He'd been gone for 4 years. But God, it sounded like him. I stayed there, hand on the lock, listening to my dead brother's voice beg me to open the door. And I didn't. After 20 minutes, the voice stopped. I sank to the floor, back against the door, and I cried. I didn't report what happened that night. Not officially. What would I even say? I heard my dead brother's voice calling from the woods. They'd pull me off tower duty, send me for a psych eval, maybe put me on administrative leave, so I kept it to myself. But I started writing everything down. Not just the date and time like before. Now I documented every detail, the exact words, the tone, how long it lasted, where the voice seemed to be coming from. I told myself it was for documentation purposes, evidence maybe if things escalated, but really I think I just needed to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. The entry for December 19th was the longest. 3 full pages. I wrote about Tyler, about the accident, about the funeral, about the guilt I'd carried for years because I was supposed to pick him up that night, and I'd cancelled last minute because of work. I wrote about how the voice knew exactly how Tyler used to say my name when he was scared, how it knew to use the phrase, "I need you," which was what Tyler had said on the phone the night he died, right before the drunk driver crossed the center line. And I wrote about how close I'd come to opening that door. Too close. Tom came by for a supply drop 2 days before Christmas. He brought coffee, canned goods, fresh batteries for my radio, and a bottle of whiskey wrapped in brown paper. "Early Christmas present," he said, setting it on the counter. "You look like you could use it." I must have looked worse than I thought, because Tom pulled up a chair and sat down without being asked. "You want to talk about it?" he said. I hesitated. Then I told him about December 19th, about Tyler's voice, about how I'd almost answered. Tom listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "It did that to me once, too." I looked up. "About 15 years ago," Tom continued. I was working Tower 4 back then, middle of January. Cold as hell. I heard my daughter calling from the woods. Your daughter? She was alive, still is, lives in Flagstaff now, but at the time she was going through a rough patch, addiction issues. We weren't speaking, and I heard her voice out there crying, saying she was sorry, saying she needed her dad. Tom's jaw tightened. I came about as close as you can get to opening that door, had my hand on the knob. But I stopped, because I remembered something my old supervisor told me when I first started. What's that? He said, whatever's out there, it doesn't just want you to open the door, it wants you to choose to open it. It needs your permission, your acknowledgement, and once you give it that, it doesn't let go. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. So what is it? I asked. What's doing this? Tom shook his head. I've heard theories. Old stories from the Navajo, Yinaldlushi, skinwalkers, things that wear other shapes. Spirits that got lost between worlds, echoes of people who died in these woods and never moved on. He paused. But honestly, I don't know, and I don't think knowing would help. What matters is the rule. You follow the rule, you stay safe. You break it. He trailed off. What happens if you break it? Tom met my eyes. I told you about the 2 rangers who went missing, but there's a third one I didn't mention. A guy named David. He worked Tower 9 before you, about 3 years ago. My stomach dropped. He made it 6 months. Then one night he called me on the radio. Said he heard his wife calling from the woods. Said she was hurt. He was going outside to help her. And? I told him not to. Ordered him to stay inside. But he said he couldn't just sit there and do nothing. He said he'd be careful. He said he'd keep the radio on. Tom's voice had gone flat, mechanical. I stayed on the line with him, heard him unlock the door, heard his boots on the stairs, heard him call out to her, and then he stopped. Then what? Then I heard him scream just once, cut off halfway, and then nothing. The radio stayed on for another 6 hours. I could hear wind, branches creaking, but no David, no footsteps, no breathing. Tom stood up, walked to the window and stared out at the forest. We found the radio the next morning, sitting in the snow about 20 yards from the tower, still on, still transmitting, but no David, no tracks, no blood, nothing. He turned back to me. So you follow the rule, Ethan. No matter what it says, no matter whose voice it uses, you stay inside. You don't answer. You survive. He left an hour later. I didn't touch the whiskey for 3 days. Christmas came and went. I spent it alone in the tower, eating canned chili and listening to carols on a crackling AM radio station out of Flagstaff. It was depressing as hell, but at least it was quiet. The callings started again on December 28th. This time it was a woman. Middle-aged, maybe. She didn't ask for help, she just talked. I know you can hear me, she said. Her voice was calm, conversational, like she was chatting with a neighbor over a fence. You're wondering what I am, what I want. Everyone does at first. I stayed away from the window, didn't respond, didn't move. You think if you ignore me, I'll go away. That's what they tell you, isn't it? Don't answer. Don't acknowledge. Pretend I'm not here. The voice drifted closer, or maybe it just got louder. I couldn't tell. But I'm always here, Ethan, in the trees, in the spaces between the branches, watching, waiting. My hands were shaking. I clenched them into fists. Do you want to know what happened to David? I closed my eyes. He opened the door and I was so grateful. Do you know how long it had been since someone opened the door? The voice was right outside now, just on the other side of the wall. He took 3 steps, that's all. 3 steps into the snow. And then he saw me. Really saw me. Not the shape I was wearing, not the voice. Me. I could hear something moving outside, something large, branches snapping under weight. He tried to run, they always do, but it's too late by then. Once you've seen, once you've acknowledged, you're already mine. The voice changed, deepened, became something that wasn't quite human anymore. I'm very patient, Ethan. I can wait. I've waited before. Weeks, months, years. Eventually everyone opens the door. And then, just like before, it stopped. The voice, the movement, everything. The silence was deafening. I sat on the cot staring at the door, and I realized something terrifying. It wasn't trying to trick me anymore, it was trying to break me. I called Tom the next morning, told him I needed to talk. He drove up that afternoon, and I played him the audio recording I'd made on my phone. He listened to the whole thing. When it finished, he was pale. "You recorded it?" "Yeah, I thought maybe if I had proof—" "Delete it." "What?" "Delete it, Ethan. Right now." His voice was sharp, urgent. "Why?" "Because that's not just a recording. That's an invitation. You think you're documenting it, but what you're really doing is carrying it with you, listening to it, giving it attention. That's what it wants." I stared at the phone in my hand. "Delete it," Tom repeated. I did. And the moment I hit the delete button, I felt a weight lift off my chest that I hadn't even realized was there. Tom sat down heavily in the chair. He suddenly looked older, tired. "This is escalating," he said quietly. "It doesn't usually talk like that. Not to the same person, not this quickly." "What does that mean?" "It means you're in deep, kid. It's fixated on you now. So what do I do?" "You follow the rule, same as always. But you also need to be smarter. Don't record it. Don't write about it in too much detail. Don't give it more attention than you absolutely have to. And if it doesn't stop—" Tom met my eyes. "Then we pull you off Tower 9, put you somewhere else, somewhere it hasn't been. Has that worked before?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. New Year's Eve came. I'd been at Tower 9 for 3 months, longest 3 months of my life. I spent the evening listening to fireworks echo across the valley, people in Flagstaff probably, celebrating, oblivious to what lurked in the forests just miles away. At 11:47 p.m., I made my last radio check-in of the year. "Tower 9, all clear." "Copy that, Tower 9, Happy New Year." "You too, dispatch." I turned off the radio and waited. Midnight came and went, no callings, no voices, just wind and the distant pop of fireworks. I started to relax, started to think maybe, for once, I'd get a quiet night. Then, at 12:34 a.m., I heard it. Not a voice this time. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. Crunching through the snow outside the tower. I moved to the window and looked out. At first I didn't see anything, just snow, just trees, just shadows. Then I saw it. A figure. Tall. Too tall. Standing at the edge of the clearing, maybe 30 yards from the tower. It wasn't moving, just standing there, watching. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it directly at the figure. For a moment, just a split second, I saw it clearly. Long limbs, wrong proportions. Legs bent backward like a deer's hind legs. And the face, if it didn't have a face, not really. Just a smooth, pale surface where a face should be. But I could feel it looking at me. I could feel its attention like a physical weight. I dropped the flashlight. The beam swung wildly, casting shadows across the snow. When I looked back, the figure was gone. But the footsteps continued, circling the tower, slow, patient. And then, from directly below me, I heard a voice. Calm, familiar. Tyler's voice. "Ethan, I'm right here. Just open the door." I backed away from the window, pressed myself against the far wall, and I waited. The footsteps circled the tower 3 more times. Then they stopped. The voice spoke one last time. Soon. And then silence. I didn't sleep for the rest of that night, or the next, or the one after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure, that smooth, featureless face that somehow still managed to watch me. Those legs bent wrong, like something pretending to be human but getting the anatomy just slightly off. By January 3rd, I'd been awake for nearly 70 hours straight. I was running on coffee, adrenaline, and sheer stubbornness. My hands shook. My vision blurred at the edges. I kept seeing movement in my peripheral vision, shadows that vanished when I turned to look. Tom noticed immediately when he came for the weekly supply run. "Jesus Christ, Ethan. When's the last time you slept?" I couldn't remember. I told him as much. He didn't ask why. He just nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. "You need to come down from the tower," Tom said. "Take a few days. Get some real rest. We'll have someone cover your shift." "Who?" I asked. "Who's going to volunteer for Tower 9? Tom didn't have an answer for that. "I'm fine," I lied. "I just need to adjust. It's been a rough couple of weeks." "Ethan," I said, "I'm fine." Tom studied me for a long moment. Then he sighed and set a bottle of sleeping pills on the counter. "Take one of these tonight. Doctor's orders. You're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion." I nodded. Didn't tell him that I was more afraid of what I'd see in my dreams than what I'd hear outside the tower. After Tom left, I stared at the bottle for an hour. Then I took one pill, chased it with water, and lay down on the cot. I was asleep in minutes. I dreamed of the forest. Not the real forest, the one outside my window, the one I patrolled every day. This was something else. The trees were taller, darker, their branches twisted into shapes that hurt to look at, geometry that didn't quite make sense. I was walking. I didn't remember starting, but I was already deep in the woods, snow crunching under my boots. My breath came out in white clouds that hung in the air too long, like they were reluctant to dissipate. Ahead of me, through the trees, I saw the figure. It was standing perfectly still, back turned to me, waiting. I knew, in that dream logic kind of way, that if I kept walking, I'd reach it. And if I reached it, something terrible would happen, something irreversible. But I couldn't stop. My legs kept moving, carrying me forward step by step, and I realized with growing horror that I wasn't walking toward it. It was pulling me. The distance between us closed. 10 yards, 5, 3. It turned around. Where its face should have been, there was nothing. Not a blank surface like I'd seen through the window. This was absence, a void that swallowed light and sound and thought. Looking at it felt like falling into an endless well, and I knew that if I fell too far, I'd never find my way back. Then it spoke. Not with Tyler's voice this time. Not with any voice I recognized. This was something ancient. Something that had been speaking long before humans learned language. "Soon," it said. And I woke up screaming. The sleeping pills went into the trash after that. I'd rather stay awake than go back to that place. But the exhaustion was catching up with me. I started making mistakes. Small ones at first, forgetting to log weather data, missing a radio check-in. Then bigger ones. I left the propane heater running at full blast all day and nearly ran out of fuel. I dropped my radio and cracked the casing. On January 8th, I nearly walked outside after midnight. It happened so fast I barely registered it. I was sitting at the desk, staring at nothing, when I heard Tyler's voice again. Closer than ever, right outside the door. "Ethan, please, I'm so cold. Just let me in. Just for a minute." And I stood up, walked to the door, put my hand on the lock. I don't remember deciding to do it. One moment I was sitting down. The next, my fingers were on the deadbolt, and I was turning it. The lock clicked open. The sound snapped me out of it. I yanked my hand back like I'd touched a hot stove, stumbled backward, and hit the wall hard enough to knock the breath out of my lungs. Outside, Tyler's voice laughed. Not Tyler's laugh. Not even close. This was something cruel and delighted and very, very old. I crawled to the door, relocked it, and wedged a chair under the handle for good measure. Then I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and waited for sunrise. I called Tom at first light, told him what happened. Told him I'd almost opened the door. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I'm pulling you off Tower 9, Tom said finally. "Effective immediately. Pack your gear. I'll be there in 2 hours." "Where will you send me?" "Tower 12. It's farther south, lower elevation, different forest entirely. We've never had incidents there." "And Tower 9? Another pause. "We'll shut it down for the season. Maybe longer. I'll figure something out." I should have felt relieved. I should have been grateful, but all I felt was a gnawing sense of unease, like I was running from something that couldn't be outrun. "Tom," I said, "what happens if it follows me?" "It won't," Tom said. But he didn't sound convinced. I spent the next 2 hours packing, clothes, books, supplies, everything I'd accumulated over 3 months at Tower 9. It didn't amount to much, a duffel bag and a backpack. As I worked, I kept glancing at the windows, watching the tree line, half expecting to see that figure standing there watching me leave. But there was nothing, just trees and snow and empty silence. At 9:47 a.m., I heard Tom's truck rumbling up the access road. I grabbed my bags, locked the tower behind me, and climbed into the passenger seat without looking back. We drove in silence for the first 10 minutes. Then Tom spoke. "You did good, Ethan. Lasting as long as you did. A lot of people would have broken sooner." "Doesn't feel like I did good," I said. "Feels like I ran away." "Running away's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's the smartest move you can make." I didn't respond. I just watched the forest roll past outside the window, and I tried not to think about the smooth, featureless face I'd seen in my dream. Tower 12 was different. Lower elevation, like Tom had said. Juniper trees instead of pines. Warmer, drier air. The landscape was more open, less claustrophobic. During the day, you could see for miles. The tower itself was older but better maintained. Solar panels on the roof, a newer radio system. Even a small TV with a DVD player and a stack of old movies. It felt safer, normal even. For the first 3 nights, I heard nothing. No callings, no footsteps, just wind and the occasional coyote. I started to think maybe Tom was right. Maybe it was tied to Tower 9, to that specific place. Maybe leaving had been enough. Then came the 4th night, January 12th, 1:47 a.m. I was halfway through a rerun of some old western when the TV cut to static. Not unusual. Reception was spotty this far out. I got up to adjust the antenna. That's when I heard it. A voice. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. "Ethan." I froze. I told you I was patient. It was the same voice from New Year's Eve, the one that had circled Tower 9, the one that had said, "Soon." And now it was here, at Tower 12. "You thought you could leave," the voice continued, calm, almost amused. "You thought distance would save you." I backed away from the window. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might break a rib. "But you invited me in, Ethan. Not with words, not with the door, but with attention. You wrote about me, thought about me, dreamed about me. And every time you did, you pulled me closer." No, that wasn't possible. I'd deleted the recording. I'd stopped writing detailed logs. I'd done everything Tom told me to do. "It doesn't matter where you go," the voice said. "I'm already here. I've been here since the moment you heard me the first time." Outside, in the darkness, I saw movement. A shape. Tall and wrong and horribly familiar. "All you have to do is open the door. Just once, just for a moment, and this all ends." I grabbed the radio, hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. Tom, do you copy?" Static. "Tom, it's here. It followed me. It's at Tower 12. I need—" The radio crackled. But it wasn't Tom's voice that came through, it was mine. "Tower 12, all clear," my own voice said through the speaker. Calm, steady, like nothing was wrong. I dropped the radio. Outside, the figure took a step closer, then another. It was almost at the base of the tower now. And then from directly below me I heard the sound of footsteps on the stairs. I didn't think, I just moved. I grabbed the chair, wedged it under the door handle, and piled everything I could find on top of it. The table, the propane tank, my duffel bag. The footsteps reached the landing. Slow, deliberate. Then they stopped. Silence. I stood there, breathing hard, staring at the door, and then I heard a knock. 3 soft taps, like someone politely asking for entry. "Ethan," Tyler's voice said from the other side of the door. "It's me. Really me this time. Please, you have to let me in. It's right behind me." I pressed my hands over my ears, squeezed my eyes shut. It's not him. It's not him. It's not him. "Ethan, please!" Tyler's voice was panicked now, desperate. "Oh God, it's coming, it's—" A scream, high and piercing and so real. Then silence. I stayed pressed against the far wall, hands over my ears, eyes shut, and I didn't move for the rest of the night. When the sun finally rose, I opened my eyes. The barricade was still in place. The door was still locked. Nothing had gotten in. I moved to the window and looked outside. The snow around the tower was undisturbed. No footprints, no tracks, no sign that anything had been there at all. But carved into the bark of the nearest juniper tree, about 10 feet from the tower, were 3 words: "Soon you'll open." I called Tom, told him everything, told him I wasn't safe, that it had followed me, that I didn't know what to do. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end. Then Tom said, "Pack your gear. I'm pulling you out of the forest entirely. There's an administrative position at the main station. Desk work. You'll be inside surrounded by people 24/7. Will that work?" "I don't know," Tom admitted, "but it's the best option we've got." I left Tower 12 that afternoon. Tom drove me down himself, didn't say much during the ride. When we reached the main station, he walked me inside, showed me my new desk, and left me with a stack of paperwork and a warning. "Don't go back into the woods. Not at night. Not alone. Not until we figure this out." I nodded. But deep down, I knew the truth. It didn't matter where I was. It didn't matter if I was surrounded by people or locked behind steel doors. I'd given it attention. I'd acknowledged it. And now it had a hold on me that distance couldn't break. All I could do now was wait, and hope that when it finally came for me, I'd be strong enough not to open the door. The administrative position at the main ranger station was supposed to be safe. A desk. Fluorescent lights. Other people around at all times. No dark forests, no isolation, no towers. For the first week it worked. I processed incident reports, updated trail maps, answered phone calls from hikers asking about permit requirements. Boring work, mind-numbing work. But it kept me busy, kept me distracted. And most importantly, I wasn't alone. The station housed 12 staff members during the day. Rangers coming and going, secretaries handling paperwork, maintenance crews stopping by for supplies. There was always someone within earshot, always voices, always movement. At night, the building was locked tight. Motion sensor lights outside, security cameras at every entrance. I slept in a small room on the second floor, barely more than a closet with a cot, but it felt safer than any tower ever had. For 7 days I heard nothing, saw nothing. The nightmares stopped. My hands stopped shaking. I started to think maybe, just maybe, Tom had been right. Maybe being around people, being away from the isolation of the forest was enough to break whatever connection had formed. Then came January 19th. I was working late, finishing up a backlog of fire risk assessments. Most of the staff had gone home by 6 p.m. By 8 p.m. it was just me and Carla, the ranger I'd met months ago at Tower 6. She was in the break room, heating up leftover soup in the microwave. "You should head out soon," she called from the other room. "Roads are getting icy." "Just need another hour," I said, eyes on the computer screen. "I'm almost done with these reports." "Suit yourself. I'm out of here in 10. I heard her gather her things, keys jingling, jacket zipping. She poked her head into my office. "Lock up when you leave, yeah?" "Will do." "And Ethan?" She paused in the doorway. "You doing okay? You seem better, less stressed." I managed a smile. "Yeah, I think I am." She nodded, satisfied, and left. I heard her truck start up outside, gravel crunching under tires as she pulled away, and then I was alone. I worked for another 45 minutes. The building was quiet except for the hum of the heater and the occasional creak of old wood settling. Outside, snow had started falling again, fat flakes drifting past the windows. At 8:52 p.m., the lights flickered, just once, barely noticeable. I looked up from the computer, frowning. The building's electrical system was old but reliable. Flickering lights weren't normal. I stood up, walked to the window and looked outside. The parking lot was empty. The motion sensor lights were off. Snow was already covering my truck, and standing at the edge of the tree line, barely visible in the falling snow, was a figure. Tall, too tall, legs bent wrong. My stomach dropped. It shouldn't be here. This wasn't a remote tower. This was the main station. There were houses less than a mile away, a highway just beyond the ridge. But there it was, watching me through the snow. I backed away from the window, pulled out my phone, called Tom. It rang 4 times. Then voicemail. "Tom, it's Ethan. It's here, at the main station. I'm alone and it's..." The lights went out. All of them. Computer, heater, hallway lights. Everything. The building plunged into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty office. My breath came out in visible clouds. The heater had stopped and the temperature was already dropping. From somewhere downstairs, I heard a door creak open. The front entrance. I'd locked it. I knew I'd locked it. I'd checked twice. Footsteps echoed through the building. Slow, methodical, moving through the first floor, checking rooms one by one. I moved to my office door, closed it as quietly as I could, and locked it. Then I pushed the desk in front of it. It wasn't much of a barricade, but it was something. The footsteps reached the staircase, started climbing. I pressed myself into the corner, phone in one hand, a heavy flashlight in the other. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The footsteps reached the second floor, stopped. Silence. Then, from just outside my door, Tyler's voice spoke. "Ethan, I know you're in there." I didn't respond, didn't move, barely breathed. "You can't run anymore, you can't hide. You've known that for a while now, haven't you?" The door handle rattled. Testing. The lock held. All those nights in the towers, all those hours lying awake, listening, you thought you were resisting, but you were wrong. The voice changed, became something deeper, older, not human. Every time you heard me, you gave me more of yourself. Every time you thought about me, you let me in a little deeper. And now, Ethan, I'm so close I can taste you. Something hit the door. Hard. The wood splintered but held. I scrambled backward, phone light swinging wildly. The beam caught something under the door, a shadow spreading like liquid, seeping through the crack at the bottom. It was getting in. I looked around frantically. The window. Second story. Maybe a 12-foot drop into snow. I could survive that. I ran to the window, unlocked it, shoved it open. Cold air and snow rushed in. I looked down. The drop was manageable. Beyond the parking lot, I could see lights from the highway. Civilization. Safety. Behind me, the door exploded inward. I didn't look back. I just jumped. I hit the snow hard, my ankle twisting beneath me. Pain shot up my leg, sharp and immediate. I ignored it, pushed myself up, started running, limping toward the parking lot. Behind me, I heard something land in the snow. Heavy. Wrong. I risked a glance over my shoulder. The figure was there, not at the window, not on the roof, just there, in the snow, 20 feet behind me and closing fast. I ran harder. Every step sent fire through my ankle, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. My truck was ahead, keys in my pocket. If I could just reach it. Something grabbed my shoulder, cold, so cold it burned. I screamed and wrenched away, stumbling, falling into the snow. I rolled over, flashlight swinging up, and for the first time I saw it clearly. It was tall, easily 7 feet. Its limbs were too long, joints bending in places they shouldn't. Its legs were shaped like a deer's hind legs, ending in something that wasn't quite hooves, wasn't quite claws, and its face. God, its face. It was smooth, pale, featureless. But as I stared, shapes began to form. Eyes, a mouth. Tyler's face, overlaid on that blank canvas like a mask that didn't quite fit. "You made me wait so long," it said with Tyler's voice, "but it was worth it. You're so full of fear, so full of doubt. I'm going to savor every moment." I scrambled backward, snow soaking through my clothes. My hand closed around something hard, a rock, half buried in the snow. I threw it. It hit the thing square in the chest. The impact didn't even make it flinch, but it stopped advancing. And it laughed. Not Tyler's laugh, not any human laugh. This was the sound of branches breaking in a windstorm. The sound of bones snapping under pressure. "You still think you can fight me," it said. "After all this time? After everything I've shown you, you still think there's a way out?" It leaned down, bringing its face, Tyler's face, close to mine. "There isn't." And then, from somewhere behind me, I heard a voice. "Ethan, get down." "Tom." I dropped flat into the snow. A shotgun blast split the night. The thing reeled backward, shrieking. A sound like metal tearing, like glass shattering. It clutched at its chest, where the shot had hit. And for just a moment, I saw through the illusion. There was nothing underneath, no body, no flesh, just darkness, absence. A void shaped roughly like something alive. Tom fired again and again. The thing staggered, then turned and ran, not toward the forest, but into it. not disappearing into the trees, but dissolving, becoming part of the shadows between them. And then it was gone. Tom lowered the shotgun, breathing hard. He looked at me, his face pale. "You okay?" I nodded. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. He helped me up, half carried me to his truck. We didn't speak until we were miles away from the station, the forest nothing but a dark smudge in the rearview mirror. What was that?" I finally asked. Tom's hands were tight on the steering wheel. "I don't know, I've seen it before, or things like it, but I don't know what it is, some kind of echo, maybe. Something that exists in the spaces between things, between sleep and waking, between life and death." "Why me?" "Because you listened," Tom said quietly. "Because you paid attention. That's all it takes. One moment of acknowledgement, and it finds a way in." "Did the shotgun kill it?" Tom shook his head. "No, it'll be back. Maybe not tonight, maybe not next week, but it'll be back. These things, they're patient, and they don't forget." We drove in silence for a while. Finally, I asked the question I'd been avoiding. "What do I do?" Tom sighed. "You leave, not just the forest, not just Arizona. You go somewhere far away, somewhere it hasn't been, somewhere with people and noise and light. You surround yourself with life, and you don't come back. Will that work?" He didn't answer. I left Arizona 3 days later, packed everything I owned into my truck and drove east. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, didn't leave a forwarding address. I just left. I ended up in North Carolina, small town in the mountains, got a job at a hardware store, rented a tiny apartment above a laundromat. It was noisy, cramped, the complete opposite of a ranger tower. It was perfect. For 6 months I heard nothing, saw nothing. The nightmares faded. The fear loosened its grip. I started to think maybe I'd actually escaped. Then, on a warm night in July, I was walking home from work. The sun had just set, and the streetlights were flickering on. I passed an alley between 2 buildings, narrow, dark, uninviting, and I heard it, faint, distant, but unmistakable. "Ethan." I didn't stop, didn't look. I just kept walking, because I know now, I know the truth. It doesn't matter where I go. It doesn't matter how far I run. I acknowledged it. I gave it attention. I let it in, and it's never going to let me go. So here's my advice. If you're ever out in the wilderness, any wilderness, not just Arizona, and you hear someone calling from the woods after midnight, you don't answer. You don't investigate. You don't even think about it too hard. Because the moment you do, the moment you acknowledge that something is out there, it knows. And once it knows, it'll never stop calling your name. I still hear it sometimes, in alleys, in parking garages, in the quiet moments between sleeping and waking. "Ethan," it whispers, "soon." And I know that one day I'm going to be too tired, too worn down, too desperate for it to end, and I'm going to answer. I just hope it's not tonight.